Aloha, my name is Kelly Ball and I have been a professional gardener for over 36 years, 16 of them here on the beautiful garden island of Kauai. It is so very nice to be here with you in the Kekaha Community Garden, and I would like to share with you some of my life experiences and what I have observed in my gardening career. I am a graduate of the University of Southern California, which I attended from 1968 to 1972 with a degree in humanities. After narrowly escaping enslavement in the American military, I instead was able to join the Peace Corps and was assigned to the country of Nepal, where I lived for 2 years, eventually teaching English at a Hindu orphanage and at a Tibetan monastery. I did not become a lawyer, as was my original intent, and instead became a gardener in 1977 in Carmel Valley, California, where I resided for 3 years in the Korean Buddhist Sambosa, located there. This is the Korean version of Zen Buddhism. I started at the bottom of gardening, pulling weeds and trimming hedges. While I did take basic courses in organic gardening at Monterey Peninsula College, almost everything I know has been from experiential observation and almost 4 decades, of which I've had quite a number of different experiences, although I'm still pulling a lot of weeds. After 6 years in Carmel Valley, I moved to New Mexico and farmed for 2 years at 7,000 foot elevation near the very small town of Coyote, New Mexico, 75 miles northwest of Santa Fe. The growing season there was just about 4 months, and I sold my produce twice a week in Santa Fe at the farmers market and at some of the finer restaurants located there. I returned to my native Los Angeles and lived in Venice Beach for 13 years, where I pursued my career in landscaping and ornamental horticulture over much of Los Angeles and Orange counties. I was a regular volunteer for 7 years at the world-famous Huntington Botanical Garden in San Marino, California, which is located right next to Pasadena. I worked in the Huntington's nursery, where I was exposed to plants from all over the subtropical and tropical world, and spent many hours planting and caring for the 10,000 square foot formal Italian herb garden that featured culinary, medicinal, and herbs used for dyeing fabric with natural color. My plant knowledge took a quantum leap there, and about year 17 into my career, I began to realize that our biosphere is a lot more intelligent than we usually give it credit for. I cannot tell you how many times in my career I cast my eyes heavenwards and thanked the divine that I had become a gardener and not a lawyer. After living in the city for 13 years, I began to change my emphasis to growing food and came to Hawaii for its year-round climate and slower pace. I have gardened and farmed literally from Haiena and Wainiha to Waimea and Kekaha and many, many points in between. I ran the kitchen garden at the Hanalei Bay Resort for the Balihai restaurant there for 4 years, established gardens at the Waimea Hongwanji Buddhist Temple, and the community garden project at the Aloha Church in Lihue. I taught sustainable gardening and farming at Kauai Community College for 2 years and ran the organic garden there for 3. While living on a farm on Kalihiwai Ridge and establishing another 10,000 square foot garden, I was introduced to the use of spirulina algae as a fertilizer by a Hawaiian friend who had seen it used on the Big Island. After a little research, I found that some of the world's best spirulina was produced at the Kona Kailua coast, and quickly ordered some of what they list as agricultural grade spirulina. 10 days after the first application, I could see the improvement in my plants, and after 30 days, I began to think that this spirulina was the answer to world hunger. The plants so noticeably healthy, vibrant, and green, I felt that I'd finally arrived in Oz. Spirulina is a primitive blue-green algae and is one-celled and spiral-shaped. Scientists believe it was the first living thing on our planet, and in fact the only living thing on this planet for over 1 billion years. Unlike other algae, and in fact most of the rest of the cell structure of everything else. Spirulina has no nucleus in its cell center and is soft-bodied, having no fiber in its exterior walls, making it highly digestible to not only ourselves but plants as well. In a nutshell, the practice of organic gardening involves the creation and nurturing of a living soil, rich in microbial activity involving the breakdown of organic matter. It is this process that makes the various minerals and nutrients of organic matter available to plant and causes them to grow. The addition of spirulina, rich in proteins, vitamins, and minerals, as a powder or tea, feeds the beneficial bacteria and microorganisms already in the soil and causes them to increase rapidly, which in turn causes the breakdown process to increase in the inorganic matter in the soil and supply a steady supply of nutrients to the plant roots. The texture, taste, and color of the food we eat is noticeably improved by the use of spirulina. Some years later, a small amount, about a pound or so of spirulina, had become wet at the bottom of a barrel where I had stored it. I decided to fill the barrel with water, which made a dark green tea, and used half of its contents on a garden I had created in Kapa'a. I topped the barrel off with fresh ditch water that was available at that farm, and the brew became a dark green. I used half of it and topped the barrel off with fresh water, which changed the color from a dark green, dark forest green, to more of a light turquoise green, which was expected by adding more water. When I went back the following week, I was surprised to see that the brew in the barrel had regenerated and had turned dark green again, making me think that something was going on inside that barrel. And I realized if the spirulina was reproducing itself in the barrel, I had a very wonderful and cheap source of fertilizer. This was the discovery that is the base of this perpetual fertilizer mix that I present to you now. The formula has further developed with the addition of various green manures and other items, which we'll soon go into. I discovered that applying this tea once a week, I could use even raw organic matter such as untreated sawdust and grass clippings to the soil and still grow vibrant plants by keeping bioactivity in the earth at a high level of activity by fertilizing with the tea at least once a week. In one experiment, I grew beautiful plant starts in a mixture of only sawdust and black sand from here on the west side. As long as I fed them with spirulina tea, they were quite healthy and actually brilliant. I kept one barrel at the college going for 6 months without any addition of powder before it was washed out in a heavy rainstorm, by just repeating this process of every week taking half of it out and topping it off with fresh water. And there at the college I was using just county water, not ditch water. The beach, by the way, between Kekaha and Waimea is the only black sand beach in Kauai, and it's black color due to the broken down basalt lava rock full of minerals deposited from centuries of erosion from Waimea Valley. 1 gallon of sand may be legally taken per day by anybody to put in their gardens, and 1 gallon goes a long way. Or one can purchase a ton of rock dust from a company like Thronis, and this has also the same natural mineral content that comes right out of the rock. We don't have to order glacier rock dust from Alaska. We have our own minerals right here that we can use, and they're available quite cheaply. I think the last time I bought a ton of what they call the rock dust, which is the kind of a black sand, it was $50 for a truckload, and it will easily fertilize a 10,000 square foot garden that much. You have a question?
Well, down at the Waimea River, the guy said that you can take 5 gallons of the stuff they're dredging over there.
Yeah, it's the same.
He had said you can take 5 gallons. You can just drive right up and fill your buckets from those piles. You don't have to dig it. The same.
Yeah.
It's the same though, yeah.
The entrance,
yeah, there's
the
the piles
to the ocean.
There's like, yeah, right by the entrance to the ocean. And at Lucy Wright Park.
Right. So apparently because of the dredging, they're allowing you to take a little bit more at a time.
Yeah. But they won't scoop it in your truck for you. Even though they're right there.
During this time of experimentation with the spirulina, I also attended a seminar presented by a Japanese company that has developed a product called EM, or essential microorganisms. Originally designed to break down city sewage sludge by promoting microbial activity, it was quickly discovered to break down huge deposits of manure, which were also a problem at zoos with large animals. And from there it was discovered its effectiveness on plant-based compost piles, particularly the vast amount of rice straw that's produced in Asia during rice production, which in the past has been burned and of course is not good for the atmosphere. After trying over 200 different materials to come up with this formula for promoting increased microbial activity, they finally settled on 3 items: baker's yeast, lactic acid, and molasses. This is now sold commercially for close to $80 a gallon. The combination of yeast and lactic acid fed by molasses creates enzymes and vitamins and may be transferred to the soil as a stimulator in a tea. As these are common items, and we can easily make this brew ourselves at considerably less money. In fact, on the way over here, I stopped by for the 3 items that I needed. A big safe. To purchase them, it was about $12. Here's the baker's yeast. Here's the molasses. And beer that's brewed, wheat beard brewed, not barley beard brewed, but wheat beard brewed has natural lactic acid in it, so I use 2 of these beers in my mix. There's other sources of lactic acid like acidophilus and of course things like yogurt and other probiotic foods. With these, we're going to do this in just a minute. We're going to prepare this barrel over here. But for $12, we're able to inoculate 40 gallons of water compared to the 1 gallon for $80. I have been making my own for a number of years, adding it to my spirulina brew with completely satisfactory results. For a more scientific review of why EM works, and in fact why even spirulina works, there is a paper that you can Google on the internet. It's called the Higa-Parr White Paper. Higa is after Professor Higa of Japan, who came up with this. His name is it's spelled Higa-Parr. Professor Parr is the American he worked with. And it's a fairly long paper about sustainable gardening and farming. Among some of the more interesting and beneficial attributes of adding EM to our mix is that it aids in nutrient uptake by the plants. It can heal soils that have been damaged by pesticides, herbicides, and chemical farming. It will be a great tool for restoring these lands around here to health. And another interesting thing it does is it fixes atmospheric nitrogen in the soil. So instead of buying nitrogen and fertilizers, we can actually fix it in the soil using this mix. Many years ago, a professional tomato grower shared the fact that 1 part ocean water to 20 parts fresh water is an excellent source of minerals that cause his tomatoes to thrive. I have seen it boost many struggling plant starts to vibrant health, and at a rate of 1 part ocean to 20 parts fresh water is dilute enough to avoid salt damage. I have, however, read in organic literature that even small amounts of salt are actually beneficial for plant growth and health. Finally, when studying what are known as green manures, we realize that many plants have high concentrations of naturally occurring minerals, and that by blending them in a blender, we get a jump start on their availability. Comfrey, moringa, chicory, kale, fennel, gliricidia, pigeon peas, and many others are full of concentrations of phosphorus, potassium, nitrogen, calcium, and many other trace minerals, which we can add to our mix to create quite a potent brew. So I'm going to now demonstrate a barrel here of how to prepare it. And I'd like to show you this barrel. This barrel is available for $27 at Home Depot. The brew that we make with the spirulina water will attract mosquitoes and they'll lay their larvae in it.
Any problem with using metal barrels?
Uh,
As long as they don't have any type of contaminants in them?
I would imagine the only problem is that being constantly wet, they will cause the barrel to start rusting and decay, which they'll do within a year and a half to two.
Would rust affect the spirulina?
I doubt it. This is what we rigged up for a top. As I was saying, mosquitoes can breed in the spirulina water, and we cut holes in the top and we applied a screen with glue so we can still get sunlight and air into the mix and keep the mosquitoes out. So here I have about 2.5 pounds of spirulina. Oh yeah, that's a good point, because we did try a number of glues that didn't work, and what we ended up was with a marine glue that is, you know, the black one exactly, that is resistant to moisture and water. So here, oops, no further ado, we'll add our 2 pounds. I usually use about 2 pounds of spirulina and mix it in. Now, what I've noticed, as I was saying before, that when I first tried this, I realized that it was reproducing itself in the barrel while I topped it off. At least something is reproducing itself. The water is going back to a dark green. Stirring your spirulina mix once a day, it helps to oxygenate it, and it is the oxygenating that keeps your mixture from going anaerobic, which has a pretty profound smell, I'll put it that way. What I eventually turned to was a solar-powered aerator, which I get from a company called 1000 Fountains. The model that I ordered has actually 2 bubblers. It was $99 delivered to Kauai, which makes it pretty cheap. And setting this solar panel in the sun, I get my brew aerated all day long, which causes a nice green scum to form on the top of my barrel of the water, which indicates to me that I am in fact growing plant material in my barrel.
So at night you don't need to aerate it?
No, I think if it's aerated 4 hours a day, it's probably enough to keep it going. But in truth, when I first started using this, I wasn't even stirring it, and I was still getting the effect of the color change back to the dark green, and the scum forming off on the top, even just sitting in still water. So, and even with county water, not living waters like ditch water or river water. So I was quite pleased. That barrel I managed to extend for 4.5 months. And as I was speaking earlier, I had prepared a barrel at the college that lasted for 6 months until it was washed out by a big rainstorm. And at that point, I realized adding a handful of spirulina once a month boosts my mix, so it's always potent. Yeah.
So what you're saying is the mix you're going to make right now, if you were using this like once a week, you could keep using it for 6 months?
Yep, that's why it's called Perpetual Fertilizer.
Without redoing another...
Without redoing anything else.
So like once a week you could draw how much gallons
I took, well, this is a 40-gallon barrel, and so I'm taking half, so I'm taking about 20 gallons per week and using it as a tea in whatever method of delivery you might have. It works as a foliar feed and a ground feed. I mostly use it it might target the roots of the plants, because once in the soil, the spirulina, as I was saying, is highly assimilable by the bacteria. It causes the bacteria to multiply rapidly, and then that gives you an extra boost for the breakdown of the organic gardening, or the organic material that you've placed in the soil. This process works in tandem with putting organic material in your garden, which most of us are already doing. But it's important that there's something in the soil that these bacteria have to feed on and break down. So after discovering the EM mix and how easy it was to make, I decided to start adding that to my spirulina mix. And so I've usually purchased for this formula 3 bags of the baking yeast like this. Add the contents to the barrel. The molasses is used to feed the mixture. You really, for a barrel this size, you really only need a half cup of molasses. Even a cup of molasses will turn your mixture brown, so it's very potent. So you really don't need a whole lot of molasses. So I'm adding in here about a half cup of molasses. And then looking for a vegetarian source of lactic acid, I discovered that beer brewed from wheat, not barley, has natural lactic acid in it. You can buy acidophilus. It's kind of pretty expensive at $14 for a small bottle.
What about sour poi?
Pardon me?
Sour poi?
Anything like that that has lactic acid could be used. So I settled on this wheat beer because it has natural lactic acid. It's Blue Moon. They're brewed in Belgium, which specializes in wheat beers. And I put 2 of these standard size wheat beers into the brew. You know, I'm going to need a shovel or something to stir this. I forgot about that.
Use 3 bags of the brewer's yeast. Is that how they?
It's not brewer's yeast. Brewer's yeast is or nutritional yeast is not living, so it doesn't have an effect in the solution. You have to get baker's yeast, you know, that they make bread out of. You have to. This is alive and active, and basically it's pretty much the same process of making a sourdough starter that's a living food, which is what we're creating here, is a living food. So, so as I got into this and saw how my potency was boosted by the use of this homemade EM formula, there are other techniques that can be used as well that are equally cheap and easy. I knew an old tomato grower many years ago here on Kauai, and he pretty much fed his tomatoes from a solution of 1 part ocean water to 20 parts fresh water. And as we all know, the ocean water is full of minerals and trace elements, and at a rate of 20 parts fresh water to 1 part seawater, you've diluted the sodium enough so that you're not damaging your plants. And again, I have read that even a little bit of salt is good for plants. They will absorb it and use it. So we have here, this is a 4-gallon or 5-gallon bottle of ocean water, to which, since this is 40-gallon barrel, I'll add approximately 2 gallons of ocean water to this mix. Well, we got it today just down here. I know there's all kinds of questions at this point about what's healthy around Kauai and what's not, including the water. So we'll just go ahead and add 2 gallons of this. There we go. That's probably enough for our purposes. So as this solution grew and I began to realize how easy it was, and I was teaching sustainable farming and gardening at KCC for a couple of years. And as they say, you don't learn your subject until you start teaching it. So I realized that there were many plants in the plant kingdom that are concentrators of the minerals that we're looking for: phosphorus, potassium, nitrogen, trace elements, calcium. And some of the best I have here. The number 1 is comfrey, This is high in both phosphorus, potassium, and calcium. These are the things we spend great amount of money. You know, the NPK formula we see on the bags of fertilizer mixes, whether chemical or organic, and we can draw these things and use them right from nature. Another one of the new discoveries for me is the power of what the Filipinos around here call the kayamunga, which in English we call the moringa tree. This too is full of many, many important minerals and vitamins, and in fact in the Philippines, after a woman gives birth, they give her a tea made of this leaf and flower. And I think as we begin to study plant nutrition, we find out that what's good for us is often good for the plant. So our nutrition is not, needs are not much different than plants. Aloe vera is another one. This one is full of calcium. Calcium, while not a nutrient for the plant, sweetens the soil and allows nutrient uptake by the plant roots by balancing the pH of the soil. So,
How do you introduce the aloe vera?
well, this is, after thinking about this, I said, why not do just this? Take a blender like this and put in a few comfrey leaves. These are Gliricidia leaves. These are nitrogen fixers, and as anything part of the pea family we know is full of nitrogen and nutrients.
How do you spell it?
The Gliricidia, I'm sorry you asked me that.
It's in your handout.
And put,
Gliricidia like pigeon pea?
yes, it is. I mean, in terms of its high content of nitrogen, it's the same idea, and they're both leguminous plants.
Did you want some endive?
I got some endive. Another, you know, common kale is full of potassium, phosphorus, and other trace minerals. Putting a few kale leaves in this mix. The chicory family, which grows quite well here in Kauai, we should really be growing more of it. I find it completely delicious and use it in sauces and potatoes and all kinds of mixes. Yeah, and there's many kinds of chicories, of which endive is only one version of chicory. You know, some of those, you're familiar with radicchio, those very burgundy red cabbage looking plants? That's a chicory family. So any of these plants are full of minerals, and what they're doing, the health that they're giving our own bodies is the same health we can transfer to the plants by growing our own. So I've got, what do we got? We got an aloe, we've got comfrey, which is probably, if there was a queen of permaculture, it would be the comfrey plant for its many uses. And so we've put in the Gliricidia, the comfrey, and an aloe, and the moringa leaves. That's good to start. Put it in, and while pardon me?
You don't need to dry the comfrey.
I don't dry. You can't. There are many techniques to use it. I have a gardening buddy who's gone over many of these techniques for years. We've gardened together. He cuts his comfrey. He lets it dry out till it's yellow and kind of brittle. And he just goes around and breaks it up over his plants. And there he is. He's adding minerals right to the soil. Or you can even lay it green as a mulch right around the base of your plants, and it's going to dry out right there and decompose. So these are excellent sources of plant food without having to go to a store to purchase them. So here we've got, let me blend this a little more. I don't know. And so here I have whipped up a smoothie for smoothies for plants, and I add this to my mix. And there you go. I've got a very potent source of plant nourishment right here in this barrel for not spending much more than $12 on the materials.
$80 worth of product.
Yeah, I got a lot more than $80 in there. You can drink it. You can. I don't, but
The molasses.
yeah, there's nothing in here that's harmful to any of us. In fact, it's all nourishing to all of us. And even the spirulina, I buy the agricultural grade spirulina from Kona Kailua and we get 700 or 800 pound crates of it for $600, which makes it less than $1 a pound, which as you see, I mean, for a fertilizer, That's extremely cheap. I turn around and bag it up. These are 5-pound bags, and I sell it for $3 a pound. So anybody that would like to purchase one of these bags for $15 to recreate this at home is more than welcome to. So I think in conclusion,
So I got a question. This is, so you wait 4 or 5 days before you draw?
no, I would start using this immediately.
Oh, is that right?
Right, yeah. Maybe I'm going a little too fast, but I use it immediately.
Huh.
And pretty much my own formula of simplicity for the simple techniques of growing, I've got it down to adding basically sawdust and sand to my soil in the west, on the east side, which is mostly clay. Here on the west side and near the ocean, where sandy soils, you don't really have to add any sand. But again, the black sand is full of nutrients and minerals, which is a local source, both phosphorus and potassium in the black sand. And I would go ahead and use this now on a bed I've just prepared with raw sawdust, sand if I need it, the black sand or the black rock dust, and then feed it once a week with this brew. It's important, if you're going to be using raw organic matter in your soil before it breaks down, to keep your spirulina application steady, because that keeps the microbial activity at a rate that you're not losing nitrogen to the breakdown of raw materials. Another one of my favorite mulches is just plain grass clippings. And another one of the really better mulches available for free is the tamarind tree. The tamarind trees grow out here on the west side, and the mulch of the tamarind turns your soil into almost like black custard. I mean, it's just raw, and mix it in and water it, and you would think you've just bought the most expensive mulch or compost from, you know, in a bag in a store. So this is Karin brought us a bucket of the scraped up leaves from under a tamarind tree. So this is a great source, and especially out here on the west side there are tamarind trees, so it's a good source just to condition your soil.
No grinding of that?
No grinding. I just pour it in and dig it and wet it down, and it really is beautiful. The leaves are of the tamarind tree are, as when they break off. Here's the branches of the green. This is what it looks like. These are the pods. The pods themselves are used in cooking, and the Caribbean cooking, and I think Indian cooking uses tamarind too as well.
The Coca-Cola nut.
Oh, so you just,
Sprout profusely when you do.
pardon me?
They do sprout a lot, like when you use it, like you gotta,
Oh yeah,
if you don't want a tamarind tree.
yeah. I wouldn't put the seed pods in. You wanna just pretty much try and get the leaf, and
These grow real big, the trees?
oh yeah, they're huge.
I just brought them so you'd be able to recognize when you're out scouting and looking for this debris, which you can tell sometimes it's a tamarind tree because there will be mounds of this debris underneath. And so you're doing everyone a service by bringing it home and using it as mulch, because it tends to mound up on the side of the roads anyway.
Tamarind trees go briefly deciduous in May. They'll lose their leaves in May, and by the middle of June they're already covered with green, but that's when they drop their leaves in Hawaii, is in May. So
This is the flower, so you kind of can identify too.
this would be a great industry. A small vial of, well, excuse me, I'm getting mixed up. It's the moringa would be a great industry. It grows like a weed here. And a small vial of moringa oil goes for $30 on the market, which is processed from the pods and flowers. And it is an excellent source of minerals and vitamins for all of us. So I started taking it every day in my own little brew that I make every morning with spirulina and the other things I use. So in conclusion, I think I'd like to point out that here we often call where we live paradise. It's an ancient Persian word that actually means garden. And it points to the fact that we are all very deeply connected with plants. Our spirituality is connected with plants. Every major religion on this planet seems to visualize heaven as some kind of a garden. So I think we find our natural place as human beings in tending of orchards and gardens. I think that's what we're here for. So this becomes not only a hobby or a means of feeding ourselves, it becomes the center of our own spiritual awakening. And I am, in fact, very happy I'm not a lawyer, and I've been a gardener for 37 years. So thank you for attending, and if there's any more questions, we can try and go over that.
Thank you. I have a question. Have you ever tried this in wetland, like low-E taro patch aquaculture? How would this spirulina affect like a stream ecosystem?
Well, that's a very good question, because this method here is good for a garden this size, but if we were to adapt it to larger farming projects, I can see we're going to have to be building ponds that perhaps we can gravity feed the liquid that's in those ponds where we've introduced spirulina cultures. And if we get a growing culture in ponds here where we don't have to worry about it being pure enough for human consumption, I think we can create our own hotbeds of...
Could it grow out of control though, do you think? Could it be a problem?
I don't know that. I don't think it would. I think, especially with aloe, with the way they have circulating water all the time, I can't see that it would be a problem. That brings another very important natural source of nutrition as well as mulching is the azolla that grows in loy ponds and taro patches. That's been used for over 3,000 years in China as a nitrogen fixer in the water on its own. And it too, the azolla is actually a variety of floating fern. And when you look at the mineral content of it, it too is full of phosphorus and potassium and all these minerals that we use to feed our plants. So growing even a tank of azolla, it multiplies quite rapidly, and even scooping that out and using it as a mulch around your plant is going to be very beneficial. Did you have a question?
I did. Does any of those, the spirulina or it's also called a fairy fern? Is that what the...
Azolla?
Azolla? Duckweed. It's called duckweed. Duckweed? Is that bothering the fish? They love it. They eat it?
The what? The azolla?
Or the spirulina, does it bother the fish?
I have seen fish growing in ponds, living with spirulina. I don't know how it would affect, and if you could even grow fish in a pond that was directly devoted to growing spirulina. I'm not sure of that. I do know that the mosquitoes will breed in it, and that's why we have the screens on the top of our barrels.
Does the aerator help prevent the mosquitoes?
No. No, it doesn't. They'll still continue to breed in.
The aerator puts oxygen plus it circulates the water, the fluid throughout that whole barrel continues.
That's right. That's right. And the oxygen contributes to the growth of and the breakdown of any organic matter you've put into your compost barrel. There's other ways of making teas that, you can put this stuff raw right into a barrel and let it rot, if you want to. So, but the blender breaks it down faster.
Do you spray mostly?
I mostly pour with just a watering bucket. I dip it into my barrel, and I've even used just straight blended comfrey water on my orchids and just seen them bloom like crazy because of the high phosphorus content that's in the comfrey leaf, and call it a natural high bloom. You can go spend $15 or $20 for 010-0 at Walmart, or you can grind up some comfrey leaves and pour it right on your plants, and you're not using chemicals. So
You pour it directly over the whole plant or just around the base of
you can do either. You can use it as a foliar. One of my good friends is Robin Torquati, who grows the plant starts that she sells in Kupa'a, and she foliar feeds her citrus in her farm in Molawa'a, and claims that within a day or two of spraying with a spirulina foliar spray, the trees blossom out. It's just a very powerful stimulant. And I know when I put it on my orchids that haven't bloomed in years, within days I can see spikes forming on the orchids. It's very fast, actually. Just comfrey water alone.
Do you use anything to dechlorinate your water when you spray?
I don't, other than the fact that usually with my topping off the way I do, the water sits for 4 or 5 days to a week, and that will at least evaporate most of the chlorine that you find in county water, which is not too bad considering where I know what the water was like in Los Angeles. It tasted like pool water. So if you can get ditch water, river, well, we're talking rivers being poisoned now, but if you can get a living water like ditch water, you avoid that problem with the chlorine. And you're probably adding a lot more natural microorganisms that incur that water. So.
My husband is a chemist, and he says that chlorine evaporates in the air if you collect it first, let it sit, and then use it.
Right, and so effectively that's what we're doing by topping off and waiting a week. So.
You know, does this Higa Par white paper say what is the NPKs of these different things? Do you happen to know specific?
Well, that's a good question because it brings up the subject of how we got the NPK system in the first place, which is kind of a tyranny. It was first developed in Germany in about the 1850s, and there was a professor in one of the major universities that began promulgating chemical fertilizers, and all these learned scientific papers were appearing all over that you could not possibly grow vegetables using compost, and you had to have these chemical fertilizers. It kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it? And they managed to switch people's thinking about how to fertilize their plants from what people have been doing for 10,000 years, which is composting plant materials and then using it in their gardens, or fish or animals, fish particularly. And they decided that really, they narrowed it down. I guess this is good for marketing as well. While there are something like 17 elements that they've identified as necessary to plant growth, many of them trace elements like zinc and molybdenum and manganese and magnesium, they narrowed it down to nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium and left it at that. And that is why we have those 3 numbers on all our fertilizers today, to mark those 3 qualities that they artificially decided were all that plants needed, when in fact they need a lot more. The good news is that those elements are available everywhere. They're not hard to find. They're in everything. They're in our bodies, they're in the plants, they're in the soil. So it's just learning how to make them available is really the trick, not finding them exactly. So the Higa Par paper is largely devoted to creating a model for sustainable farming that is based on renewable resources like I've just presented here, and getting away from the chemical poisoning of all the land, which we know has become in less than 200 years. We have managed to poison great sections of the earth with these practices. So that's where NPK comes from.
Is there any insect repellent ability of the spirulina?
Not that I know of. It will, when it's first applied, it can attract flies, and that's, it's working when the flies come, but the flies only last for about 20 minutes, and then the material is usually absorbed into the soil and the flies go away.
Are you able to put horse manure in this too?
You could. I don't think I would be using manures in this mix. If I was to use horse manure, I'd probably compost it first and then apply it directly to the soil. I'm a vegetarian and a vegan, and this whole approach to fertilizing is based on vegan principles, where we're not using chicken manure or fish emulsion and all the other byproducts of the animal slave trade that is also really something that we as a race really need to consider, how we nourish ourselves. In the murder of all these animals that goes on, I don't see how we can possibly not be affected by the billions of animals that are killed every year, if not every day, and all the fear and anxiety that we in turn eat by eating these animals as they're executed. So approaching fertilization from a vegan point of view avoids all that. And recently I received a notice from the Maui Organic Growers Association that there is a bill before Congress right now that If you use they might pass this bill that if you use worm castings in your soil, you have to wait 9 months before you can plant it because worm castings are now considered dangerous. That's what's going on in our government, and that's how stupid it's getting. So we have a lot of political issues and motivation here in changing.
Tickets to the worms.
I don't know. So as I said, developing a new approach to fertilization has many, many levels of meaning and importance, and cleaning up our earth and our biosphere is certainly one of the major ones. So this approach will help that.
So with soil like we have here in Keikaha, I mean, you can still use amendments to your soil, but this here actually could take just sand and sawdust and produce halfway decent.
Well, since this soil here, a few blocks from the ocean, is naturally sandy, you don't need to add sand. You could just add sawdust, which is what I've done. I have vegetable gardens just a couple blocks from here that I've done by just adding sawdust and making sure that I fed that garden once a week with the spirulina. Sawdust a little raw, and but by adding the spirulina tea once a week, again it overrides the nitrogen, loss of nitrogen and the breakdown of the sawdust. And another excellent and cheap mulch, once again, is grass clippings. The best gardens I've ever seen have been fed only by grass clippings, one in Santa Monica and one in Hyena. And that seems to be the only thing these gardeners put in their garden, and we're having great success just by adding weekly layers of grass clippings with nothing else. So there's all kinds of discovery out there waiting of what's effective, you know, which in the textbooks tell us you can't do it, but in fact you can. So
yeah, grass breaks down really fast.
it breaks down very fast, and another thing that grass contains is silica, and the silica has a quality of not only attracting light, but it keeps warmth. Once it absorbs light, it keeps warmth in the soil. So during the night when it cools down, silica material in your soil is actually gathered warmth from the sun and then holds it during the night and keeps your roots a little bit warmer. And that seems to be another critical factor in just, you know, putting your plants over the top, so to speak, you know. So there's a book here too. You can get this from the Cyanotech company in the Big Island. You could order this book on spirulina. It's a good thing if you're going to use spirulina. You might as well read this book. It's called Spirulina Superfood. It's by Kelly Moorhead, who's since deceased, but had a farm up in Molawa'a for a number of years. He was Kauai Sunrise Farms, and supplied a lot of lettuce, organic lettuce, to some of the big supermarkets on the island, including Safeway. So their logo was a big whale on their plastic cover of their lettuce mixes. So, but he was an executive at the spirulina plant in Kona Kailua. Although he would not use spirulina, as many times as I told him, he kept telling me, "Oh, there's no nutrients in it," and he never used it. He wrote this book, and it's very informative on the contents and usage of spirulina, so at least for humans.
Can you tell us what you know about Bacillus thuringiensis, or his mosquito dunks, you know, you see advertised, to combat, to control mosquitoes? I understand the bacteria consumes mosquito larvae.
I am not aware of that.
In organic gardening magazines and everything. It either comes in a donut
Yeah,
that you can float in a body of
right.
water.
I have seen it advertised, but I don't have any insight into how that works. Although I do know that the Bacillus thuringiensis is in fact a living bacteria used as a powder. It's considered safe for people and animals. It is what they are splicing into every cell in our corn, and what consuming large amounts of it might do is a whole nother subject, you know, about. But they use it to kill the corn borer, and which unfortunately also has a side effect of killing the butterflies as well that might land on the corn and eat the pollen, which is another one of the problems. And apparently the consumption of this genetically modified corn is causing unknown bacteria to form in our own gut, of which nobody really knows what the effect is, long-term effect is going to be, other than to many people develop very dangerous allergies that have resulted in death in some cases. So that is used for all soft-bodied insects. When they ingest the Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a living bacteria, I guess it pretty much explodes the stomach of the worm or the grasshopper that eats it. So that's what's going on with that.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for attending. This was looked forward to this for a long time.
It's really great. I think the thing that I get from it and that I often forget is often when something becomes available on the market, we have to ask ourselves why. Why is that available on the market? And here at the garden, we've used a lot of fish emulsion, a lot of fish fertilizer. And recently I've learned that it's because they scrape the bottom of the ocean with their nets and they can't sell all that fish, and then they grind it up and use it as fish fertilizer. So same with the product you were discussing about if it's a side effect, if it's a byproduct. A lot of times these large companies are selling these products to us not because they're the best thing to use, but because we have a lot of it. And why I so appreciate you, Kelly, is that you're bringing something to us that we all are not looking at, that we all need to be looking at, that we have plenty of on this island, and no one's trying to sell it to us, and it's high nutrients. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And he brought this for us if anyone would like.